What's going on, everybody? This is John J Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with a brand new episode of the FCS Dynasty here on NCAA 2006, one of the greatest NCAA games of all time. Over the course of this FCS season, we started with close to 120 teams that were vying for that ultimate prize, and that ultimate prize is a national championship. Not everyone got a chance to finish above 500 though. Not everyone got a chance to go to the playoffs. And of course, not everyone got to be that national champion. So we're going to have a lot to cover in this episode. We are going to check out plenty of things in this dynasty. We are going to see some of the award winners, the paths that Georgia Southern and James Madison took in order to get to the national championship. We'll also go ahead and see who's going to be moving on the greener pastures, who's going to try to transfer up to an FBS program, and or go ahead and move on to the NFL. Plus, of course, your favorite part of this entire episode, something that many of you look forward to, the recruiting. Who's going to be the future of this FCS dynasty, and who is also going to be sending out some information about how you guys can get more involved in this series, which does include being a custom player. So hope you guys are excited for this great episode, and if you are, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button for me, hit that subscribe button as well if you have to be brand spanking new to the channel as well as like what you see around my YouTube channel. And with that, let's go ahead and hop into it, starting with the schedules for both Georgia Southern and James Madison. But we start with the runners-up here in year number 4 as we track their season here in the FCS Dynasty. And for James Madison, this was not the great start that they were hoping for. This was a team that, went in and, they went 1-2 to start the season. They lost a pretty tough game to Arkansas Pine Bluff to start things out, who was ranked in the top 15 at that time, but then they rebounded nicely, beat Texas Southern to get to 1-1. However, they did suffer a second loss when they had to go on the road to take on Penn State. That is a Power 5 actual Big Ten program, and James Madison lost that game close, but it moved them out of the top 25. It put them in a spot to where you're going to need to win a lot of games in your conference play, and that's exactly what they did. They rattled off 3 wins, including a win against Delaware State, who did get into the top 25 towards the end of the season, even though they did not make it into the FCS playoffs. They beat Florida A&M. They had a solid season this year and just rattled off a bunch of wins. 7 straight wins to end the regular season, all before getting into conference championship week. They took on Bethune-Cookman, as of course, where they beat them 48-14 in order to get that automatic bid from the new look ACC. But James Madison started this tournament in the second round though. They started things off taking on Northern Arizona, and James Madison did win their first game. They won 24-7 in the second round against Northern Arizona. And then what we saw in the quarterfinals, they took on a Cinderella in Tennessee Martin. The Skyhawks, they had a good year at 9-5, but James Madison took care of business against them as well. They won 48-17 in their quarterfinal game. Finally, in the semifinals, they went up against Southeast Missouri State, led by Coach Ty Bergian, and James Madison won 41-27, and that was what took them into that national championship game against Georgia Southern, where unfortunately they did fall 46-7. Now, speaking of those Georgia Southern Eagles though, they ended up finishing 17-0. It was a perfect season, and although this wasn't the most competitive schedule that they had to deal with, at least not until they got into conference play. In non-conference, they took on UCF, who finished well below 500, as well as a Princeton team that was 6-5. They were close to winning the Ivy League, but they fell just short this year. Then going into conference play, they blew out the Citadel on the road. They also beat Southeastern multiple times. Once in the regular season, they won 31-24. They also blew the doors off of Northwestern State and Elon after that, as well as McNeese State Wofford. Texas State was a convincing win as well. Florida A&M was a blowout. That was a game that we did end up watching. That was one of their other non-conference games that they got to enjoy before they beat Southeastern in the conference championship. And not only did they beat them in the conference championship, they also went up against them in the second round of the FCS playoffs. So they played Southeastern 3 times. They beat Southeastern 3 times as well. But after the Southeastern game, they did have a rematch of the national championship all the way back in year number 3. It was Georgia Southern, though, that got their revenge. They took down the defending national champions 31-7 in the quarterfinals. Following those exercising of demons in the quarterfinals, they went to the semifinals to take on San Diego State. And San Diego State, they came in as the number 5 overall seed in this tournament, and they did not get the job done. Georgia Southern still takes care of business, winning 43-26. And of course, they finished off that 17-0 season with a 39-point win in the national championship. But now let's check out the award winners here in year 4 of the FCS Dynasty. And we'll start with the Heisman Trophy, which did end up getting spoiled just a little bit when its starting lineups were announced. But Ikaika Woods did end up winning the Heisman Trophy. He finished in 2nd place last year, so he does finish his college career with a Heisman Trophy as well as a national championship as well. Other players that did end up being a part of that Heisman finalist list was Jonathan Bauer, who was held pretty silent in the semifinal game against Georgia Southern, but a great year for him nonetheless. 2,800 all-purpose yards and 25 touchdowns on the year, followed by Stephen Robinson, the sophomore quarterback from New Mexico State. The Aggies did not make the playoffs this year, but Robinson did end up throwing for over 5,000 yards and had 49 total touchdowns on this season, all of which happening in the regular year. Moving into 4th place was another Georgia Southern player. It's the running back, Blake Williams, and it was rightfully deserved. Blake Williams, he had nearly 100 yards in the national championship game and ends his year with almost 3,000 all-purpose yards between running the football, catching the football, and of course that special teams. He also had 27 total touchdowns, so kind of surprised that he finished in 4th place, to be honest. And finally, rounding out the group is Jason Shaw, the junior from South Carolina State. In his final game of the season, he had 44 carries for 260 yards, 5 touchdowns, and also 39 receiving yards as well. Jason Shaw does finish the year with 2,700 all-purpose yards and 22 touchdowns. As for the other award winners for year number 4, we start with the Maxwell. Stephen Robinson did end up winning for New Mexico State, but 2 San Diego State players after that, Jonathan Bauer and Ryan Vaughn. Ryan Vaughn being a first-team all-conference nominee. He had 3,500 yards and 41 touchdowns. Up next, we have the Bednarik Award going to the best defensive players in the country, and one of your customs actually does win the award this year. The true sophomore Robbie O'Brien wins the Bednarik. A great year for him, 57 tackles, 35 which were behind the line of scrimmage, 21 sacks as well. He was all over the field for the Colonels. He also had a couple of interceptions and forced fumbles too. After that, the runners-up in the Bednarik finalist list was Jeff Cox, a first-team all-conference nominee who had nearly 100 tackles on the year. He is a true junior and does have one more year of eligibility should he decide to accept that. In addition, Anthony McConnell, the junior from Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts has not gotten a ton of attention since year number 1. When they played up against North Dakota State. That was a blowout, but Oral Roberts silently putting together a pretty good program, and Anthony McConnell is one of those guys. He finishes 3rd on the Bednarik. As for the best quarterback in the country, that goes to Stephen Robinson as well, so he also wins the Maxwell on top of the best quarterback in the country. Dustin Arnold finishes in 2nd place, the second-team all-conference nominee, ends this year with 3,200 passing yards and 300 rushing yards, plus 43 touchdowns for the Utah State Aggies. as they were able to move on to the second round of the playoffs this year. In third for the best quarterback, the final finalist for the best quarterback award, that's going to go to Ryan Vaughn as well. After that, we have the Walker Award, which does go to the best running backs in the country, and Kobe Pace. He's going to pace the rest of the group. He's going to be your Walker Award winner this year. Pace ends his season with 1,400 yards rushing and 250 yards receiving as well. He had 21 total touchdowns. Setting up behind him, though, finishing in second, is Kendall Kirkpatrick, the sophomore from Eastern Carolina. He was a first-team all-conference nominee, but the junior from Texas Southern had 1,700 yards rushing, 10 rushing touchdowns as well, and he had a receiving touchdown through the air as well. He was a vocal point of the Texas Southern offense, and I'm hoping he sticks around for his senior year because Texas Southern, they will be eligible for the NCAA playoffs again. Their sanctions are over. Up next, we have the Best Wide Receiver Award, and Jonathan Bauer does win the Best Wide Receiver in college football down the FCS level. He was somebody that was on that Heisman finalist list. Also in there as well, this is going to be one of your first-team All-Americans, is Michael Session, the New Mexico State wide receiver. The Aggie finishes with 110 catches, 1,600 yards, and 15 touchdowns on the year. But we do have a finalist on this list, and that is Jody Gentry. He ends his season with 1,300 yards receiving and 17 touchdowns. The junior custom from James Madison was a first-team all-conference nominee. As for the best tight end in the entire country, they will give this award to Billy White, the sophomore tight end from Western Carolina. A good year for him as he was a red zone threat for the Catamounts. He had 26 catches for 600 yards, plus those 6 touchdowns. That being said, we did have some good talent at the tight end position this year, one of which being Dan Griffin, the sophomore from Texas Southern. The second-team All-American finishes with 25 catches, almost 500 yards, and 7 touchdowns as well. And at 6'5", I can see why, but we do see some love for the Charleston Cougars, though, as even though he was named second-team All-Conference in a smaller conference, being recognized as a finalist, 40 catches, 850 yards, and 4 touchdowns too. Tyler Meeks had a fantastic senior season for the Charleston Cougars. After that, we move to the Hog Mollies that control the trenches, the offensive line, and we had a great offensive line group with John Forqua winning the Best Offensive Line Award here in year number 4. The sophomore from Southern had 92 pancakes and only allowing a couple of sacks in the process. After that, we do have a couple of Georgia Southern offensive linemen in the finalist list. Cedric Hart, the first-team All-American, had 91 pancakes, but allowing just 1 sack on this season. And a true freshman will also make an appearance on this list as well. He was a first-team All-Conference nominee, and he had more pancakes than John Farquhar. That being said, he did allow 8 sacks. However, the Remington Award will go to a Georgia Southern offensive lineman, as Rich Nixon was able to go an entire season without allowing a single sack. He finishes his year with 67 pancakes, so a great job for the sophomore from Georgia Southern. After that, we got John Clark, a first-team All-Conference nominee. For North Dakota State Bison, Clark had 29 pancakes and a couple of sacks on the year. Finally, in third place, the first-team All-Conference nominee, Nate Keel. He had 23 pancakes and 3 sacks on the year. He will have a couple more years of eligibility as well for the Texas Southern Tigers. Following the Remington Award, we have the Lombardi Award, and that goes to the, I believe it's the best defensive lineman in the entire country, and they're going to give it to Ben Moore this year. He is a junior from Southeastern's, part of the first team from the Southeastern University to go to the FCS playoffs within this series. He had a great year as well, double-digit sacks, 4 forced fumbles, and 30 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He will have 1 more year of eligibility should he want it. Speaking of players that still have a year of eligibility to work with, is the junior from Alcorn State, Phil Miller. He's a first-team All-Conference nominee, and he finishes his year pretty well too. 4 forced fumbles and a defensive touchdown Alcorn State not known for their defense, but Phil Miller trying to change that culture. Rounding out the finalist group is Cole Meadows, who is a sophomore at James Madison. Got to compete in the national championship game and was a first-team all-conference nominee. He finished his year with 63 tackles, 30 TFLs, plus almost a dozen sacks and a forced fumble too. He will also have a couple of years of eligibility remaining. But now we move on to the linebacker group, and the linebackers will be sponsored by Tony Stewart. He wins the best linebacker in the country and doing a little bit of everything for the Aggies. He had 5 sacks on the season, 4 interceptions, and 5 forced fumbles too. Tony Stewart is also just a sophomore. But a surprise for me, though, is Jeff Cox, who was on the running for one of the best defensive players in the country. He also finishes second in the Best Linebacker Award, as does Anthony McConnell. The Oral Roberts outside linebacker finishes third here as well. After that, we go to the secondary, where we have the Fort Pay Award, which goes to the best defensive back in the country. And this year, they will give that award to A.J. Cunningham, the junior from Southern, as he led the Jaguars, or part of a defense that led the Jaguars to their second FCS playoff appearance in this series. Cunningham had 8 interceptions and was a certified ball hawk. Also in that ball hawk category is Mike Jones, the sophomore corner from San Diego State. The first team all-conference nominee, had 4 interceptions and also forced a couple of fumbles too. And finally, finishing in third is John Johnson, the junior from South Carolina State. The first team all-conference nominee had a good 6 interceptions, a forced fumble, plus 4 touchdowns. And now we have the Groza Award that goes to the best kicker in the country. They will give it to the sophomore Kieron Ross. The sophomore, almost perfect on the year, 13 for 14 on field goals, but was perfect on extra points, as nearly was Kyle Bolden, the sophomore from Southern. He was 14 for 16 with only missing 1 extra point on the year. And then finishing in third is going to be your national champion, Georgia Southern. Brian Henry is a freshman redshirt, but even though this is his first year on the field, he's already considered one of the best kickers in the FCS. Rounding out the most of the awards, we have the best punter award. They will have Robert Hayden finish in first. He's a sophomore from New Hampshire. Following Hayden, we have Alan Taylor finishing in second. He was a representative of the Utah State Aggies and is a junior. And of course, in third place, we got Seth Williams. The first team all-conference nominee was a sophomore in Eastern Carolina. Finally, in terms of actual players, we go to the best return man in college football. This is now called the Jet Award, but Larry Scott wins it this year. He had nearly 2,500 all-purpose yards and 19 touchdowns, was the most dangerous in that return game. Speaking of dangerous, Jeremiah Sims was also that as well, having nearly 1,900 all-purpose yards on the year and 15 touchdowns. The junior from Sam Houston State was a second-team all-conference nominee. And then in third, we of course have Blake Williams, who was in that Heisman discussion as well. And finally, the coach of the year is going to go to the coach for Georgia Southern. I mean, you got to do it when you're the first coach to go undefeated in an entire season, 17-0. That is no easy feat whatsoever. Utah State is in here as well. Their coach finishes in second. He was 11-3. And then Coach Montano, Mateo Montano, he is 44-12 in his 4th season at James Madison. He finished 13-3 and took the Dukes to a national championship. Other customs that were not finalists, but they did make it to the semifinals of their respective awards, is Jody Gentry. He finished 10th in the Maxwell Award for this season. Ray Waddle, he finishes as a freshman All-American. He finishes 9th in his true freshman campaign. Was kind of close to taking Grambling State to their first NCAA playoff, but they did unfortunately fade in the second half of the season, but a great year for the true freshman regardless. Also on the semifinals finalist list was Mateo West. He also finished 8th for the best wide receivers in college football. For best offensive line, Chris Black made it to number 12. He had a good year for North Dakota State as well. He's a sophomore. And that concludes all of the customs that were on award lists in general. And now we will take ourselves over to the All-Americans list. This All-Americans group is certainly a special group, and we'll start with the first team All-Americans. At quarterback, we have Stephen Robinson, who won the Maxwell this year. Jason Shaw was the main tailback. He was on the Heisman Trophy conversation. He finished 5th in the Heisman voting. The other running back was Kobe Pasto, the sophomore from Southern, did win the Walker Award. And then we move on to the other receivers. Jonathan Bauer, who finished top 5 in the Heisman voting. He still has one more year of eligibility. Michael Sessions was a superstar for New Mexico State as well. He's just a junior. And of course, we have the best returnman in college football here in year number 4. Larry Scott, the 6'7" product from Southview, Missouri State. He won that Jet Award. Now we go to the tight ends, and Billy White is also recognized as a first-team All-American, representing well for the Catamounts. Then we move to the offensive line. John Farquhar won the Best O-Line Award. Cedric Hart was in that conversation as well. The junior from left guard gets that first-team nod from the guard position. Then another Georgia Southern player, we got Rick Nixon, who does win the Remington Award. He had 67 pancakes throughout the year. Then we got Andrew Johnson, the true freshman, first-team All-American. He had a great year as well, 52 pancakes and a sack. The Georgia Southern offensive line, a big reason why they're national champions. Rounding out the offensive side of the football, though, is Nicholas Alford, the junior from North Dakota State. He ends up with 80 pancakes and only allowing a few sacks as well. But now we move on to the defensive side of the football. And on the defensive side, we start with the defensive line. The first defensive line named first-team All-American is Adrian Knox. He's a freshman at SMU. A good year for him, 11 sacks and 4 forced fumbles. And then we have Ben Moore. He's going to be your Lombardi winner and also a first-team All-American too. Going into the interior of the defensive line, Rob Calhoun gets the nod. The sophomore from Alabama State, a good year for him, 19 TFLs, 9 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles as well. He took a big step up, although he does have a couple more years of eligibility too. And then the final interior defensive lineman name onto the first-team All-American list is Gary Inman, the sophomore from South Dakota. Ends his year with 9 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and somehow found a way to get an interception too. He was active with his hands throughout the season. Up next, we have the linebackers, and one of your customs is a first-team All-American, Robbie O'Brien, the sophomore from Eastern Kentucky, who did also win the Begnarid Award. In addition, we got Tony Stewart, the sophomore from New Mexico State. He won the Best Linebacker Award, so no surprise he's a first-team All-American. At right outside linebacker, though, is going to be the junior Patrick Kennedy, the 6', 249-pound representative from the Catamounts. Had 8 sacks, multiple interceptions, and 4 forced fumbles too. That is his best season of his collegiate career, and somebody to look out for to potentially either go to the FBS level via the transfer portal or going to the NFL and be one of those pros for Western Carolina. Now at the cornerback position, DeAndre Dowdell II gets the All-American nod. He had a good year this season. 3 defensive touchdowns to his name. That is not an easy thing to do. I'm surprised he did not win any awards, but this is a very talented football player. Kind of struggled for his first couple of years, but really put it together here in his junior campaign. Someone to also potentially watch out for in terms of going to the NFL or the FBS at the very least. Zoo Animal, another custom though, goes first team. Zoo Animal had a great year as well. 2 interceptions, a few forced fumbles, and a touchdown. Helped take Southern deep into the FCS playoffs this year, making it all the way to the quarterfinals. And then rounding out the secondary is A.J. Cunningham, who is going to be your 4Pay Award winner. And John Howard, the junior from Central Michigan, the Chippewa's strong safety, had 7 interceptions this year. Of course, we do have our kickers and punters that help put points on the board as well. Quan Dixon, the senior redshirt from James Madison, was named first-team All-American. And then Robert Hayden, who won the Best Punter Award, the sophomore from New Hampshire, who had 20 punts down inside the 20-yard line, as well as boast a 70-yard punt at one point. He wins first-team All-American too. After that, we got the second-team All-American group. And in the second-team All-American group, we got Jesse Young. Jesse Young had a great year as well, 4,800 yards, had 42 total touchdowns this year, so definitely well-deserved. Someone who I'm surprised didn't get any awards, so is Louis Rose. Rose had a great season too, 1,500 yards, 21 touchdowns. He also had a few catches through the air too, and he does have at least one more year of eligibility before he starts. Thinking about going to the NFL potentially, but it's going to be hard to deny him when he had 21 touchdowns over the past season. But this other running back was also a bona fide stud. Benito Zimmerman, one of your guys' custom. The junior from Florida A&M had a great season, 1,400 yards rushing and 200 yards through the air. This was someone that did have a phenomenal year and is representing well for Coach Credible, trying to change the culture at Florida A&M. So they're still trying to make their first FCS playoff appearance. Someone who doesn't have to worry about culture nearly as much, though, is Blake Williams. Blake Williams was on that Heisman finalist list and also was named a second-team All-American. For the wide receivers, we got Brent Cunningham, who I don't know how he's a second-team All-American. He had 1,800 yards this year. That is absolutely wild. Brent Cunningham is straight up a dog. But someone who also has that dog in him is Jody Gentry, the junior from James Madison. Does get on this list. He was on the Maxwell Award list, as well as I believe Best Wide Receiver too. This is of course one of your customs. I probably said that already, but it is what it is. The tight ends, among the tight ends, we got Dan Griffin, who gets second-team All-American nods. He was in the running for Best Tight End, was a finalist. And then we move on to the offensive line. Chris Black is in here. He was also on that offensive line, Best Offensive Line list. He was a semi-finalist, one of your guys' customs as well. Isaac Johnson is here too, the junior from Southern, had a great year, 56 pancakes, only allowing a few sacks too. Isaac Johnson certainly got that dog in him as well. At center, we got John Clark, the sophomore from North Dakota State. He was a finalist for the Remington Award. Then we have Matt Reed, the true freshman. This was a guy that also had a chance to win Best Offensive Line. Finished in third, but had a similar number of pancakes, but those 8 sacks did cost him the award this year. Still a very good season and nothing to hang your head about. He's only going to get better as he progresses through his college career. And then rounding out the offensive side of football in general is Brandon Pearson. He had 6-7 pancakes and 4 sacks allowed. The sophomore from North Dakota State is looking pretty darn good. Up next, we have the defensive side of the football for the second-team All-Americans. We got Elvis Pittman, the sophomore from Southeast Missouri State. He ends his year pretty well, 12 sacks, 4 forced fumbles as well, and should have a couple more years of eligibility remaining. The other defensive lineman is Phil Miller, though. He was on that Lombardi list. Phil Miller, great year. No surprise he's an All-American. After that, we have the interior defensive lineman, Andre Smith, gets second-team nods. He had 9 sacks and a couple of forced fumbles this year. Also in there is an Ivy League guy, David Drew, the sophomore from Columbia, 11 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. Very much under the radar. Columbia really did not get very many looks this year. Columbia, not a very talented team overall, but David Drew is a pretty noble exception. 80 overall, could be somebody that maybe makes it to the NFL if he stays all 4 years. Plus, he's getting an Ivy League education, so I can't even hate. For the linebackers, we have Demetrius Abdullah getting second team all nods. He had 14 sacks on the year, though, so definitely had the conversation for first team. But, you know, linebacker this year was a very good group. But Demetrius Abdullah, very good player already with 24 sacks in his career. Also in here as well is Paul Bonner, the junior from Eastern Washington. The Eagles made their first FCS playoff appearance of this series, and he was a huge reason why. 7 sacks, 4 interceptions, 6 forced fumbles, and multiple defensive touchdowns. He damn near did everything for the Eagles on the defensive side of the ball, and someone maybe to watch out for as he had this breakout season. Could be interesting to see if he tries to make his way to the NFL or goes for an FBS program with his last year of college eligibility. And finally, an outside linebacker, we got Ryan Gilmore, the junior from Utah State. He had 11 sacks and few interceptions too. Rounding out all of the All-Americans, we have Andrew Battle, the sophomore from Sanford. The Sanford corner had 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 4 interceptions, and a touchdown. The Bulldog corner did a little bit of everything as they were able to go to their first FCS playoff appearance of this series too. Also in here as well is Mike Jones, the sophomore corner from San Diego State. The sophomore corner had also the similar stats. I think it's literally the same stats. The only thing different is that he doesn't have that defensive touchdown. And then for the safeties, we got George Mason as the true freshman from Central Michigan. Had 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, and a couple of forced fumbles to go with that as well. And at strong safety, we have David Benelli, the sophomore from James Madison. Had 7 interceptions, 2 defensive touchdowns, and a serious argument for that first team All-American. He'll have a couple of years of eligibility remaining. Finally, we have Brian Henry, who finished 3rd in the Best Kicker Award list. He is going to be your second team All-American. And then Jonathan Alexander is just a true freshman from Central Michigan, gets second team nods as well. Finally, we'll go ahead and see if any of your customs did make it onto the freshman All-American list real quick. Ray Waddle gets in here. He's a true freshman, and he does get that nominee. Best freshman in the country at the quarterback position. Also making it in here is Andrew Byrd, the freshman left tackle from Georgia Southern. He had a really great first season, 56 pancakes without allowing a single sack. He transitioned to FCS college football very seamlessly. But the toughest part about any offseason is you gotta say goodbye to some certain players. And not only do we see some seniors leave, but some of your junior customs are actually going to make the attempt to go either to the NFL or go to an FBS school. Now, all things considered, for these, we'll start with our custom players that are getting ready to move on from the FCS. And we'll start at one of our user coaching schools, Florida A&M. Benito Zimmerman, he is going to declare for the NFL. He was a first-team all-conference guy, had a very good 2 years at Florida A&M. He had just really great stats. He did not play in, what was it, year number 2, I believe it was, but when he really took off, though. 16 touchdowns over the course of his year. I believe he had 4 touchdowns in his freshman year as well. Was a first team all-conference, second team all-American, so well deserved. We'll see if Benito Zimmerman makes it into the NFL ranks. As for James Madison, let me tell you about this. James Madison's going to have a lot of guys trying to go to the NFL. Stephen Rogers, David Fourn is in here as well. Kevin Vincent is there. Keith Payne is trying to go to the NFL too. So lots of draft eligible guys leaving for their junior year. But one that I wanted to talk about specifically though is Jody Gentry. He had 17 touchdowns, first team all conference. He had 33 touchdowns throughout the course of his collegiate career, and look at his accolades. He was a 3-time all-conference player, and he got his first all-American nod as well So a very accomplished football player. He's going to move on to, or he's trying to go to the NFL. And listen, even if he doesn't make it to the NFL, maybe what we do for your customs that don't go to the NFL, if they declare early, maybe we see them in the FBS. Maybe we do an NCAA 14 and have a check-in specifically for your custom guys, see how they do after they transfer up to an FBS program. So if that's something that does interest you, let me know down in the comment section. And that's something that maybe I could do in the future for future seasons of the FCS. Just let me know. But congratulations to Jody Gentry though. But now we have Doug Rose, who is a junior now at Arkansas Pine Bluff. He just finished his third year. He was a second-team all-conference nominee, but is looking to leave early. Now, he did have a rocky of a freshman season. He was hurt quite a bit his freshman year, but his last couple of seasons, he really has stepped up. He had 2,800 yards. He had 17 total touchdowns, 14 of them in his last 2 years. He is a talented football player and someone that, for the last 2 years was an all-conference nominee. A little bit of a rinse for Doug Rose. Maybe could have stayed for one more year, but Doug Rose is a confident young man, and he will be going for the NFL ranks as well. See if he's one of the few FCS players to get drafted into the league. Now, no surprise here, though, DeAndre Dowdell II, after being named a first-team All-American, he will also try to declare for the NFL draft with transferring to the FBS as a backup plan. DeAndre Dowdell II, of course, first-team All-American. He was also a first-team All-Conference guy, but this is really a breakout year for him. First couple of years he was in the FCS, didn't have any accolades. This was really a huge breakout campaign for him, something that he really needed if he wanted to leave early, and that's exactly what he got. So he will declare, so best of luck to him. If not, we'll definitely do something over on NCAA 14 and track how he does with his final year of eligibility. But speaking of playoff teams in the FCS that have some guys leaving early, got two custom guys that are leaving. Zoo Animal, first team All-American. Well, a little low for the overall, 85, so I don't know if that will be enough, but the talent is certainly there. He was a first team All-American slash first team All-Conference nominee, but an even bigger surprise though, Justin Jones. He is going to declare for the NFL. Not a great season for him. 19 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. His completion percentage hovering at 52%. He was only a second-team All-Conference nominee, but so someone that maybe could have been better off going on to the FBS level. Definitely a bold strategy for Cotton, but we'll see if this is one of those things where even if Justin Jones doesn't make it to the NFL, he lands at an FBS program. And finally, in terms of the last of the players that are moving on to greener pastures potentially, Chris Gentry. He also is going to declare early. He's an 85 overall, second team All-Conference nominee. Now, he's been a second team All-Conference nominee multiple times now, but also a risk for Chris Gentry. We'll see if it works out for him, but man, it could be a it could be really interesting to see how things work out for him up at either the NFL or at the FBS level. But even outside of our custom players, we have quite a few of some notable figures that are entering the transfer portal. I mean, you could see there is an incredibly high number of people that are entering the transfer portal. Pretty reflective of real life, but definitely some notable ones in here as well. We start with former 5-star Corey Lee. He was the backup for Eastern Illinois, 470 yards and 4 touchdowns. He will transfer to Troy, where we have to sit out for year number 5. So he is looking to be their starting quarterback for the Troy Trojans. Jeremiah Mosto, a true freshman from Southeast Missouri State. He's going to be transferring out of the program as well. He's going to go to Alabama A&M. So that'll be a really big pickup in the portal for Jeremiah Moss, should he be able to stay on their roster, as would Steve Stratton, the true freshman from Delaware. Only had 14 carries on the year, does not like his playing time, and is going to transfer to a fellow conference team in the Maine Black Bears. Huge pickup for Maine for their running game. But we do see some of your custom guys transferring as well. Hingle McCringle, the sophomore tight end from Texas State. He is going to Florida A&M, and Hingle McCringle was a very limited contributor in his first couple of years of collegiate football. Hingle McCringle is going to go to Florida A&M, so Coach Credible doing a great job again working that transfer portal, as this is going to be another weapon that they're going to be able to utilize for their offense. And also, in speaking of some guys that are transferring, J.D. McCoy, the backup running back for New Hampshire, he's sitting behind a fellow sophomore in Zach Howell. Doesn't see himself being a starter there at any point. So J.D. McCoy, he's going to put his name in his transfer portal and will make his home at Brown University, where he will have to sit out for year number 5. But, you know, he's a very smart young man, honestly, if he's going to an Ivy League school, looking to improve his education and well as getting more playing time on the field. Keeping up with some of the transfers, J.C. Samuel, actually really surprised he's transferring. He got a lot of playing time this year, 650 yards rushing, also had 5 receptions for 150 yards too, but, you know, doesn't like what's happening with his situation. And Norfolk State has not made the FCS playoffs, so he's going to leave that, and he's going to go play for the Ohio Bobcats in year number 5. Ohio, potentially a program on the rise, but the problem with Ohio is that J.C. Samuel, you know, is going to really help propel their offense. They were a C- offense this year, and their offensive output was why they were bounced early in the FCS playoffs. As for other transfers, Landon Waters, a sophomore linebacker from South Carolina State, he's also going to enter his name into transfer portal as well, going to Florida A&M. Florida A&M really doing a great job getting some notable transfers in here. You love to see that. Lance Cumprell, the sophomore wide receiver from Western Kentucky, he had a couple of touchdown grabs this year. He's going to Harvard, so again going to the Ivy League, and it's a huge hit pickup as well for the Harvard Crimson. He'll be a vocal point in their offense. Justin Crumpler from Montana, he had 16 tackles and a TFL this season. He's going in to the transfer portal and going into another conference team's football team. He's going to play for Idaho State. A huge pickup for the Bengals, and also a big loss for Montana too. Speaking of big losses, Maurice Nicholas has to be one as well. He didn't play much, but the talent is very obvious. And going to an HBCU, going to play for Jackson State. You know, they say if you actually, never mind. But Maurice Nichols is going to have a great time at Jackson State. I'll tell you that much. Joe Lambert, another New Hampshire guy, going into the transfer portal, going to a conference team, going to go play for Delaware. 15 tackles, 9 TFLs, 2 sacks. So a big loss again for New Hampshire, who's been battered by the transfer portal. Speaking of getting battered by the transfer portal and going to the pros, sophomore Xavier Wilson, the middle linebacker, had 19 tackles this year, but wants more playing time and going to Alabama A&M for it. But then we have even better transfers. We got some 84 overall guys in here. Sean Hickman, this is a surprise. He had 11 pancakes this season. He's going to Southern Illinois to get some playing time. He'll be a great offensive lineman for the Salukis and going to a lesser conference as well. Chris Booker of Sacramento State is also leaving. He had 10 tackles, multiple interceptions though. The kid can play, just not necessarily get on the field enough for Sacramento State. He is going to go play for Weber State starting in year number 5. As for Michael Douglas, he's the last of the notable transfers on this team. The sophomore tailback, good year for him, 500 yards, 7 touchdowns, 6 catches for 71 yards too. He was utilized pretty often, but doesn't really like it there at Portland State. And you know what happens sometimes? He's going to leave for Montana State in the transfer portal. And that's going to wrap up your notable transfers in the transfer portal here this offseason. But here are also some of the other notable players that are going to either go for the NFL or, just graduating. These are guys that are 90 overall or higher. We start with the highest player person in the Dynasty for year number 4. Keith Payne, the junior from James Madison. He did allow 18 sacks this year, but his talent is undeniable. A 97 overall. He is certainly going to be a certified dog. As will Kyle Anderson. He's played for 3 years at North Dakota State. He had 2,500 yards of all total offense, a first-team All-nominee. He'll look to go to the NFL as well. As will Kevin Vincent, the junior from James Madison, a punter that is declaring early. And he's a very good punter, that's for sure. One of the better punters in the country. And has good size too, 6'7". There's got to be a little bit of athleticism in there somewhere. Speaking of athleticism, the best senior in the FCS Dynasty is actually a fullback by the name of Eric Hollis. The senior redshirt for the Denver Pioneers had 100 yards rushing as well as 46 yards receiving. So wasn't used very much in the offense. He's more of a blocker. He will be graduating. Speaking of graduations, though, are going to put their name in the hat. Elton Wilcher is in this group as well. The junior from Western Carolina had 51 pancakes and 6 sacks. Elton Wilcher was also a first-team All-Conference nominee. Also in this group and declaring early for the NFL draft is Blake Williams. He was a Heisman finalist, so no surprise that he's going to be trying to move on to the NFL. Other guys moving on to the NFL looks like is Ikaika Woods, or we'll see if he goes to the NFL. He's going to create some very interesting conversations at 5'6", not a great passer, but he's an athlete, man. This dude can play. So if he makes it to the NFL, I don't know if he gets there as a quarterback or if he's someone that's going to have to move to running back or wide receiver, which I hate making that argument for African-American quarterbacks, because that's more used more for, the Lamar Jacksons of the world than Josh Allen. I'm just keeping it real. But for Ikaika Woods, that could be a serious conversation if he does want to stick around. But either way, very decorated career for Ikaika Woods. David Foreign, of course, is also going to the NFL. He had 2,800 all-purpose yards and 20 touchdowns to go with it too. Dude was a baller and was at 6'8". There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be interested in David Foreign in the NFL. But we can't talk about the James Madison offense without their quarterback. Stephen Rogers is also going to declare. He was a first-team All-Conference nominee, and he threw for 4,500 yards, or not 45 yards, 4,500 yards. That's what I meant to say. He had 45 total touchdowns on the year, and looks like he did everything that he wanted to accomplish except a national championship. Also looking to go on is Keon Traina, the junior strong safety from New Hampshire. He had multiple TFLs and multiple interceptions. He was listed as an impact player, but ever since his freshman year, he hasn't really accomplished much. I mean, this was a guy who was a second-team All-American, freshman All-American, first-team All-Conference guy, but hasn't done much in the, or at least hasn't lived up to his freshman year expectation the last couple of seasons. We'll see if Keon Traina can find his way to the NFL, though. For Quinn Rosario, the junior tackle from Northern Arizona, is going to declare as well. He had 57 pancakes and 5 sacks allowed, but not somebody that has gotten any awards. Not an all-conference guy, not an all-American guy, wasn't on any awards list. So very interesting to see. Now, the Big Sky has some very good offensive linemen, but to not have any accolades and then declaring early, it's certainly a risk. We'll see if that risk works out for him. For the free safety position, Dan Thompson will be leaving. He is a junior from Portland State. He had 5 interceptions on the season as well as a forced fumble. This year, he was a second-team All-Conference nominee, and someone that was pretty consistent over the last couple of years. Was a second-team All-Conference guy last couple of seasons. Also declaring is Stafford Joseph, the left tackle from Southeastern. He's a junior with 1 more year of eligibility, but will be foregoing that and has very great NFL size. 320 pounds, 6'8" too. I think he might transfer well to the NFL if he gets an opportunity. Speaking of guys looking for opportunities, I've talked about Justin Jones. He'll be moving on to the NFL or going to a FBS Dynasty in the future. So, be on the lookout to see how he transfers. As will be Doug Rose. We'll see him either in the NFL or we'll have an FBS checkup for these three guys. Benito Cimarron, too, is in this group. John Cooper, the running back for Western Kentucky, is in here. He was a first-team all-conference guy this year. Had almost 1,500 yards of total offense, as well as 14 touchdowns between on the ground and in the air as well. So John Cooper's going to create some conversations. He had 32 total touchdowns, with 20 of them happening in the last couple of years. But he won't be the only FCS player, obviously, leaving. Quentin Hardy, the junior left tackle from Nicholls State, will be looking to test the NFL waters. He had 48 pancakes and only 5 sacks allowed, and he has some good size too. 6'4", 306. You really like that in your offensive lineman nowadays. He was a second-team all-conference nominee, although he did not have as good of a year as last year. So it'll be interesting to see what his evaluation is, but, has gotten conference honors 2 years in a row. Also looking to go to the league is Nicholas Alford, and this was not a surprise. He's a first-team All-American, 80 pancakes too. He's ready for the NFL ranks, if the NFL is ready for him. But everyone's favorite part of the offseason is now coming up. We are here at recruiting and signing day, and what we are going to do is we're going to take a look at the best players in high school football, as well as taking a look at the best recruiting classes that we have in high school football, or not high school football, that these college FCS squads were able to put together. And also, before I jump into it, I do want to give you guys an opportunity. So if you guys want to be a little bit more involved in the FCS Dynasty, I will have an opportunity for you guys to take over one of these freshmen that are coming up from the high school ranks. I will have a template down in the description if you want to follow that, so that you guys have your free choices. So if you're an OG tier member, you could have an 80 to 85 overall guy. Day 1 tier guys are 75 to 80, Discord 70 to 75, and then YouTube is 60 to 69. And the reason I have that is because I want to incentivize my channel members, because they are supporting my channel in a more personal way, in which if you do want to check that out as well, that will be linked in the description. But all of that administrative out of the way, let's take a look at the best players in all of high school football. And the #1 player in high school football is Brandon Cobbs from Brownsfield, Louisiana. 6'6", 306 pounds. He is a massive human being, that's for sure. He is a defensive tackle, and he will be signing with the James Madison Duke. So this is a big pickup for him. He's got great awareness, and honestly, pretty fast for his size too. 4.73. He's got an A- field awareness, of 30-inch vertical jump too. Not to mention he can bench press almost 500 pounds. Look for him to make a difference in day 1. But now we go over to the athletes who don't have a defined position yet at the college level. That will be worked out during spring ball. But one thing is clear is that these guys do have college caliber talent. The #1 athlete in high school football is Danny Sims. Right in Caldwell, Idaho, the Idaho State Bengals were able to get a big-time signing, able to keep him in his home state. At 6'3", 211 pounds, he looks like he might be best suited to be a quarterback. He's got elite arm strength, but his pass accuracy will need a little bit of work. He also runs a 4.6 40. Speaking of the quarterbacks, though, Tennessee Martin is going to have an absolute stud at quarterback. Tyrell Williams from Ferndale, Michigan. He'll be the #1 quarterback in this recruiting class and signing with the Skyhawks of Tennessee Martin. He is part of that Elite 11 camp and won the Elite 11. He stands at 6'4", 228 pounds. The true freshman coming in for the Skyhawks. Great field awareness, great arm strength, and that pass accuracy, not too bad either. A B+ in pass accuracy. He also runs a 4.8, kind of 4.6 range. So somebody that is a dual threat quarterback that the Skyhawks are very excited about. As for the number 1 running back in high school football, that is Shannon Hicks, and another blue chip for the Eastern Kentucky Colonels at the running back position. This one is from Irvin Grove Heights, Minnesota, and he is 5'11", 200 pounds. That just means he's got that really good center of gravity going on for him. The Shannon Hicks here, he is a flash of lightning, that is for sure. He's got really good hands out of backfield and can define, has great vision, 4.2 in the 40, and has a 36-inch vertical jump. This is someone that can also be a difference maker and can start for the Eastern Kentucky Colonels here in year number 5. Now, fullbacks may not get a lot of love, but they're still important at times in college football, and the Southern Jaguars got themselves a good one. Todd McCall is the number 1 fullback in the high school ranks since he's from LaPorte, Texas. He is only a 4-star guy, but at 5'11", 214 pounds, he'll be a good blocker for whoever will be playing quarterback for Southern next season, as Justin Jones did move on from the program. He also runs a 4.5 and is a very complete player. But we get a surprise at the number 1 wide receiver spot, as William and Mary was able to get themselves a really strong wide receiver. Joe Robertson, he's from Eden, North Carolina, staying at 6'2", 190 pounds. So this is a kid that can certainly play some football. Haven't really heard much about William and Mary since year number 1. They had one of the best defenses in year 1, but failed to make the FCS playoffs so far in this series. He runs a 4.3 40, also coming in with a 40-inch vertical, and it's very clear he's more of a speed guy, but don't doubt those hands. Those hands can catch just about anything. Moving on to the tight end position, we got Greg Turner, and you want to talk about a potential Kevin Crum replacement down the line. This is certainly it for the James Madison Dukes, as James Madison got him to sign on the dotted line. He's from Hagerstown, Maryland, and someone that could be a red zone threat, and they're going to need some offensive weapons, as they did lose both David Thorne and Jody Gentry potentially to the NFL. Greg Turner, he's going to be 6'8", 235 pounds, a huge red zone threat, and can play some great football. Which takes us now to the offensive linemen, the hog mollies on the line of scrimmage. And the number 1 tackle in high school football this year is Allie Langford from Scrumburg, Illinois. Eastern Illinois was able to keep him in state and is ready to play day 1. The 5-star blue chip is 6'5", 326 pounds as well. And he can squat 750 pounds. He's one of those guys that can transition into college football right away. Also, somebody that could be ready for college football is Alvin Whittle, who's the number 1 freshman in high school football. Alvin Whittle is from Chamonix, Louisiana. If I butchered that, it is what it is, but could use a little bit more weight, though. He's only at 275 pounds. Does have good size at 6'4", so that suggests that his frame can handle it pretty well. The 5-star guard does have an A+ field awareness and can bench press 500 pounds. He's a very strong young man. And finally, to round out the offensive side of football, the number 1 center, that's Joel Rutledge from Wyandotte, Michigan. Standing at 6'3", 280 pounds, could use a little bit of work in the weight room, but he does have phenomenal field awareness at A+ field awareness. Also can squat 715 pounds. Someone that can contribute to a team that just made it to the national championship game this past season. But now we move over to the defensive side of the football, and we start at defensive end. The number 1 high school senior this offseason is Sean Wheatley from Saraland, Alabama. He's a little bit undersized at 5'11", so doesn't have the biggest arms in the world, but this kid, he certainly has a motor and can get after it. Known as a pass rusher, he runs a 4.5 40, so he is a heat-seeking missile, especially if he can beef up a little bit at the college level. The number 1 defensive tackle is, of course, the number 1 prospect in high school football, and that's Brandon Cobbs, and as I highlighted, is going to James Madison. But the number 1 outside linebacker in high school football, though, is Harold Long from New Braunfels, Texas. 6'3", 229 pounds. and a huge pickup for Arkansas Pine Bluff, as they were just barely left out of the FCS playoff field this past year. They are still looking for their first playoff appearance. Hopefully Harold Long can possibly take them over the top. He runs a 4.4. He also has A+ field awareness. His hands are, they're solid. They're not great, but he is a linebacker. Someone that can do just about everything, but he's most known for stopping the run. As for middle linebackers going into the interior, that is David Harris from Hawthorne, California. The California King is at 6 foot, 237 pounds, so slightly on that undersized side of things, but the dude can play some football. While he can't necessarily catch much, he does have the ability to play in coverage, as he does have A+ field awareness, plus that 4.56 40 that he ran at his high school pro day, or his, I guess, college day. Not too shabby either. A complete linebacker besides those hands. So speaking of the hands, so we gotta go to the secondary now, as the #1 corner in high school football is from Central Manchester, Connecticut. Not known for pumping out football talent, but there is an exception made for Burnett Miller. 6'5", 176 pounds. Here is a guy that just simply jumps off the page. Burnett Miller is that dude. 4.1 in the 40. This dude can fly. He can fly very well, and he's very aware as well. He's got a 44-inch vertical too. The only concern that he may have, maybe not the strongest guy. 220 in the bench, but even then, that's not terrible for a defensive back. That might be his only weakness. Other than that, he's going to be locking down college wide receivers the minute he steps on campus. Someone that'll also be looking to lock down receivers day one is Brent Wilson, the #1 free safety in this recruiting class this year. From Mission, Texas, Arkansas Pine Bluff gets themselves yet another #1 player, as Brent Wilson is that man. 6'2", 204 pounds. What Brent Wilson can do, it's also just about everything. While his hands may not be as good, he can bench press 345, and also a 4.5, which is, you like that to be a little bit faster, but he knows how to play the field. He does remind me of Jesse Bates a little bit of the Cincinnati Bengals. And rounding out the skill position players in high school football, we now go to the #1 strong safety from Laverne, California. That's Amir Burns. Amir Burns is sitting at 6 foot, 207 pounds, and did sign with Northern Arizona, who is just coming off their very first FCS playoff appearance. So some good momentum for the Lumberjacks. He is a guy that runs a lot faster. He can move over to corner if need be, so has that versatility as a safety. Runs that 4.2, A+ in field awareness as well, B+ hands. This is someone that I can envision having at least double-digit interceptions throughout his college career. And of course, we cannot forget about those special teams unit. We got the kickers and punters. Jason Leach of San Marcos, California, is going to sign with the New Hampshire Wildcats this year. And then the #1 punter in high school football. One is a JUCO sophomore that's going to Alabama State. But the #1 high school punter is going to be Albert Jacobs from Ironwood, Michigan. He signs with James Madison. But how does that equate to the top classes in all of college football? Well, let's go ahead. I'm not going to run through the entirety of the rankings from 1 to 119, but I will have the full recruiting rankings in the pinned comments section if you do want to check that out, or if you're interested. But I will go for the top 25, as well as some of the playoff teams that made the playoffs but did not have a top 25 ranking. We start with the #1 recruiting class in college football. That is the Southern Jaguars. The Southern Jaguars this year did end up finishing in the quarterfinals this year. They made their second FCS playoff appearance of this series, and they are going to really beef up at the linebacker position. They end up signing 3 5-stars, and they're all at the middle linebacker, so going to be a lot of depth there, a lot of talent on the defensive side of the football. Be interesting to see how things go on the offensive side of the ball, but I'm sure they got some offensive talent as well, seeing that they also brought in 17 4-stars. Just sitting right behind them, though, was James Madison, who made it to the national championship game this year, that were the runners-up. They signed a lot of good talent as well. Brandon Cobbs, he's the #1 player in high school football, but they did also sign Johnny Paris from Coppell, Texas, who could be the David Foreign, Jody Gentry replacement. They're losing a lot of good depth at the wide receiver spot. And also Nathan Weber is a good add from New Jersey to help beef up that offensive line. At number 3, we have Portland State, who just made their first FCS playoff appearance of this series. And they follow that up with a top 5 recruiting class, so a very impressive job out there by the Portland State Vikings. They did only sign one 5-star, though, and that is Terry Warren. He's from Anaheim, California. He's also the top defensive end, I do believe, in high school football, if I'm not mistaken. They also managed to sign 14 4-star players. 2 of their top ones in Downey Handy and Cameron Estes are also on the defensive side of the ball. That takes us to the Southeastern Lions. In Southeastern, they made their first FCS playoff appearance and, were knocked in the round of 16. Southeastern, they really beefed up their offensive line this recruiting cycle. 3 of their top signings, their 3 5-stars, all offensive linemen. Marcus Davis, Derek Smith, and Alvin Little from different parts of the country. Alvin Little particularly the top guard in high school football. He's going to be trying to really provide some instant depth or instant contributions to a very talented Southeastern squad. Rounding out the top 5, though, is the champions of the new look Big Ten Conference, and that is Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky will finish with the 5th best class this year with 1 5-star in Shannon Hicks, who does happen to be the #1 running back in high school football. They do also sign a couple of really high 4-stars on the defensive side of the ball in Michael Johnson, as well as Justin Cohen, to provide some additional weapons on what is already a very dangerous defense. But the best team in college football that did not make the FCS playoffs this year, at least from a recruiting standpoint, is Arkansas Pine Bluff. This was a program that was just short of making the FCS playoffs. They were the final team out, and they still have not made an FCS playoff appearance yet, but they're looking to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Signed the #6 class in college football, a class that includes 3 5-stars, Brent Wilson, Harold Long, and Glenn Smith. Glenn Smith in particular, that's someone to watch out for, the replacement for Doug Rose, who has moved on from this program. But we go back to your FCS playoff teams as we check the #7 recruiting class. It's Georgia Southern, the national champions, end up with the 7th best recruiting class, but only 1 5-star, though. That's Raymond Russell, who looks to be the replacement for DeAndre Dowdell II, one of your guys' customs that did lead the Georgia Southern program. They did also sign 11 4-stars, the 2 most notable in Darren Ross and PJ Simmons, both from the state of Alabama. At number 8, we have Southeast Missouri State, led by Coach Ty Bergean. Coach Ty Bergean led the Red Hawks to the semifinals this year before losing to James Madison. And they will get themselves a top 10 recruiting class too. Their 5-star being Ricky Phillips, who is a blue chip from Ironton, Ohio, but also brought in some quality pieces in Marcus White of Walton, Oklahoma, and going back to OKC to find Josh Lambert, a high 4-star that plays that offensive tackle position. Moving on to number 9 is another team that just signed their very first FCS playoff appearance here in year number 4, the Cardiac Cats. And this is a team that didn't even sign a 5-star this year. No 5-stars, but they make that up with really the depth of this recruiting class. 23 of 25 players being either 4 or 3-star players. The 3 most notable being Darnell Alvarez, Cedric Riley, and Jonathan Wilson, all which are from the state of Texas, which is in Sam Houston State's backyard. And of course, rounding out the top 10, we have the Sanford Bulldogs. The Bulldogs end up finishing with their first FCS playoff appearance and also bring a top 10 class with them as well, all of which are from the state of Alabama. Sean Wheatley is the most notable. He's from Saraland, Alabama, followed by Robin Johnson, a 4-star quarterback, and Max Stooks from Florence, Alabama. Stooks and Johnson could make a very dangerous backfield in the future. But now we go outside of the top 10, but still some good recruiting classes being put together nonetheless. At number 11, we have North Dakota State. The Bison did finish as conference champions once again, but were stunned by Tennessee Martin in the playoffs. This time, they brought in 10 4-stars and 14 3-star players. Their most notable signings are Tommy Gibson at defensive end, Carl Johnson at wide receiver, and of course, Joe Brooks, the 4-star running back from Vallejo, California. After North Dakota State, we have the champions of season number 3 in New Hampshire, who put together the number 12 recruiting class. They signed a 4-star kicker. That's the interesting thing about NCAA 06 is that at times, there will be 4- or 5-star kickers and punters. That's just a really interesting caveat in all of this. But Justin Neal and Justin Bell are both 5-star players that New Hampshire were able to get close to their area. Justin Nash from Rockford, New Jersey. He's going to be a guard, while Justin Ball is a running back from Spring Creek, Nevada, as Justin Ball looks to potentially be the replacement for J.D. McCoy, who did go into the transfer portal to sign with the Brown Bears. And now we have Western Carolina at number 13, and while we haven't provided any updates to the NCAA sanctions throughout the FCS universe, Western Carolina is one of those teams that is no longer under sanctions. So they do have their full assortment of 25 scholarships if they choose to use it. They use it to get the 13th ranked recruiting class, led by Burnett Miller, the #1 corner in high school football. But Jason Dixon and Chris Hicks are also very good 4-star players, both from the state of North Carolina. Following Western Carolina, we got Nicholls State at number 14 in the country. While they didn't have a great season on the football field, they just finished 6-5. They did have a great recruiting season, putting together an FCS playoff caliber recruiting class, led by Ryan Butler from Val Platte, Louisiana. He's the only 5-star that the Colonels did sign this year. But they also signed Josh Cantrell and Alan Pendleton, great weapons on the offensive side of the football. Sacramento State, fresh off of a first FCS playoff appearance, but they were shocked also by Tennessee Martin in the first round. Sacramento State, they did not sign any 5-stars this year, but have a lot of depth in their recruiting class as well, 20 of 25 being 3- or 4-star players. Their most notable, 2 of which are on the defensive side of the football, in Joe Pierce of the Air Force Academy. This is a guy that whose dad works at the Air Force Academy. That's FBS. Tavares Daly from Roseman, California. He's a 4-star. And of course, they added offensive weapon to accompany Jacob Hill in Adam Moore, who's from Sam Dimes, California. Coming in at number 16, we got Tennessee Tech. The Golden Eagles finished with the 16th best recruiting class. Their best signing is 4-star athlete Marcus Bell, but also have a couple more potential offensive weapons in Zach Hines and Phillip Davis, both of which play on the offensive side of the football. At 17 is South Carolina State. They also do not sign any 5-star players, but 20 of them were 3- or 4-stars. 3 notable 4-stars is Patrick Selman, Marcus Ross, who are both linebackers, and Cedric Kelly is going to be a future leader of this secondary. South Carolina State had the 17th best class. But Tennessee Martin had a great run in the FCS playoffs. They made it all the way to the quarterfinals in their first playoff appearance. They are, of course, going to have a huge boost in 5-star quarterback Tyrell Williams. He's the best quarterback in this recruiting class. But going to have a good supporting cast around him as well. He'll have Bruce Goolsby to throw to eventually from Crowley, Louisiana. He's a 4-star player. And then the defense gets some nice boosts as well. From Speedway, Indiana, it's Kevin Dems who plays that outside linebacker position. Northwestern State, however, had a very difficult year on the field as well. They barely finished 500 after being close to making the playoffs in years 2 and 3. But Northwestern State will look to rebound as they signed the 19th best class, led by Kevin Christian, who is an athlete from St. Martinsville, Louisiana. But they went outside of the state of Louisiana as well, signing Pete Mosley and Steve Taylor in order to strengthen their secondary. Looking to build off of their first FCS playoff appearance, though, is Northern Arizona. The Lumberjacks end up with the 20th best recruiting class, signing 3 4-star players in the process, and Amir Burns at strong safety, Carl Sayer, tight end from Kansas, and then their best in-state recruit, Will Love, who's a middle linebacker, playing from Coolidge, Arizona, a program that will also be making their first FCS appearance. And they were pretty close too, as the Alcorn State Braves, they also managed to sign 4 4-star players and put together the 21 best recruiting class in college football. Alcorn State this year, they signed Shannon Wowie, who's their best player, and he's from Pinewood, Florida, but also signed multiple outside linebackers too, getting Corey Sims and James James. Yes, that is his actual name. His parents definitely did him dirty, but a very good linebacking core here for Alcorn State, as the Braves are trying to build what was a very underperforming defense here in year number 4. Also looking to go to the playoffs is Texas State, but they got some work to do. Finishing 4-7, they're going to have to flip that record in order to have a chance to go to the playoffs in the future. Hopefully this recruiting class will help, as they signed the 22nd best class in the FCS. The Texas State Bobcats all are from the state of Texas, with their 3 notable players are Matt Harris and PJ Thompson to beef up that linebacking core. As well as have the best player of their best offensive players, I should say, in Jason Nelson. He's from Jacksonville, Texas. And finally, to round out the top 25, we got Texas Southern, who does have their sanctions lifted, and they take advantage by signing the 23rd best recruiting class in college football, including a 5-star guard and a 5-star quarterback. Alabama State, they also put together a good class as well. They sit at number 24, but their best player is a punter, so that'll be really interesting to see how this class performs a few years from now. And finally, rounding out the top 25 is the Fighting Blue Hens of Delaware. They made the playoffs in year number 3, but failed to make it here in year 4. They signed 2 middle linebackers and a corner as part of a pretty good recruiting class. Now, that being said, there were a couple of recruiting class outside the top 25 that I want to spend some time talking to you about. Eastern Washington being one of them, as they made their first FCS playoff appearance. And they end up signing a good class, but not a great class though. Number 36 in the country, Eastern Washington. They did sign 1 4-star, which is Andre Poole from Silverbow, Montana. That is a heck of a name there. Florida A&M also did not make the FCS playoffs this year, but they did end up signing a good class themselves. They finished number 34 in the country, all of which from the state of Florida. So a lot of talent coming in for the Rattlers, in addition to transfer portal as well. And finally, the worst recruiting class that did make a FCS playoff appearance this year was the Brown Bears. The Brown Bears only managed to sign 15 players, 3 of which were 4-star guys. But, you know, at this point, I don't really doubt the Brown Bears nearly as much. They finished 6-1 in conference play, and, you know, we've seen them sign pretty rough-looking recruiting classes in the past, but, you know, still find a way to make it to the FCS playoffs. They made their 3rd FCS playoff appearance this year, but maybe one of these days Brown will have a legitimate challenger on a more consistent basis. Maybe it's Princeton, maybe it's someone else in the Ivy League, who knows. So we have seen some of our players graduate, and we have also seen some players that will be entering the FCS Dynasty. But who is among the best of the FCS that get a chance to go ahead and compete at the NFL? We'll start with someone who's been the highest pick so far in this entire series, Keith Payne. He's a tackle from James Madison, 6'5", 339 pounds. Played really well on the way to a national runner-up and gets rewarded heavily, actually. He is going to be the 7th overall pick selected by the Las Vegas Raiders. So, great job by Keith Payne, and he also has a hidden dev trait, so he'll at least be a star dev here in the NFL. But that will not be the only offensive lineman that the Raiders did end up selecting, because with the 7th pick in the 2nd round of the NFL draft, they go back to the FCS ranks and get another offensive lineman, Eldon Wiltshire from Western Carolina, just 21 years old. Dude is a baller as well. Also, a hidden dev trade guy as well. For 6'5", 328 pounds, but also has that ability to, be pretty agile for someone of his weight. So, two very good selections there for the Las Vegas Raiders. Future pieces on that offensive line and could have a nice career. But with those two top picks out of the way, we will go in alphabetical order. I just thought that was really cool to see that. We'll now go and check in on the Chicago Bears. And the Chicago Bears, with the 16th pick in the second round of the NFL draft, they will select the running back from North Dakota State, Ken Anderson. He was known as an elusive back and has some really good ability to get into open field as well. We saw that a bunch of times in that triple option offense that they have for the Bison, and he will actually open up as the third string running back right now for the Chicago Bears. Speaking of second round offensive players though, the Cincinnati Bengals got themselves a really good football player in the 28th pick in the second round. David Thorne, the 6'8" wide receiver from James Madison. And what the Cincinnati Bengals love about this kid right here, he's someone that you guys saw was a deep threat and can be a very physical receiver, somebody that you can certainly throw that football up to. 6'8", that's somebody that is going to have a massive catch radius, and he's going to need to develop some things. His route running will need to be worked on at the NFL level, but he's got some serious potential to outlive that normal dev. But after David Thorne was selected by the Cincinnati Bengals, the Dallas Cowboys were on the clock. With the 29th pick in the second round, they selected Nicholas Alford from North Dakota State, one of those guys that helped created holes for the Kyle Anderson, I should say. Nicholas Alford, very good offensive lineman and rightfully selected in that second round range. He's actually up to a 6'6" overall given his morale, and he does have an opportunity to get some early playing time with Lowell College being in the latter stages of his career. But we do get an answer to whether Ikaika Woods does make it to the NFL or not, because with the second pick, or not, the 19th pick in the second round of the NFL draft, Ikaika Woods actually does get picked up by the Philadelphia Eagles. So congratulations to Ikaika Woods. We'll see if he stays at quarterback his entire career. Now, he is somebody that is very quick. He's 81 speed, 76 excel, 76 agility, so he does have that to work with, but somebody that is going to have to work on his arm as well as recognizing NFL defenses. He's going to be a raw product. But another quarterback was also selected in the second round of the NFL draft. With the 26th pick in the second round, the Detroit Lions are going to select the James Madison quarterback who went up against Ikaika Woods in the national championship game, Stephen Rogers. And while Stephen Rogers did not have a good game in the national championship, did have one passing touchdown, and that was it, he's still a pretty good quarterback, and he'll end up being the third string quarterback for the Detroit Lions in his rookie campaign. But someone that is, good at being a field general, different style of play. He's sort of that more traditional quarterback. But going back to the Philadelphia Eagles, as they were on the clock once again in the third round, they go back to the FCS ranks and they find themselves a solid tackle in the third round. Quinn Rosario, the right tackle from Northern Arizona. He's got some time to grow, 6'6", 309 pounds, and 21 years old too. He's a younger NFL prospect, just spent 3 years at Northern Arizona, but was part of a team that saw the Lumberjacks make their first FCS playoff appearance, and does have some serious potential and pretty agile for a guy that's over 300 pounds too. And this was where we saw a little bit of a run on offensive linemen happen late in the third round. And the Pittsburgh Steelers were right after the Philadelphia Eagles, so two Pennsylvania teams going in a row. Stafford Joseph was selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He represents from Southeast Louisiana and was the 20th pick in the third round of the NFL draft. He's also considered more of an agile prototype. But now we get into day 3 of the NFL draft here in the year 4 offseason. We now jump with the very first pick in the 4th round. The New York Giants did end up selecting Keon Traina, who had a really good freshman year back in year number 2, but his last couple of seasons did not really live up to what he was able to do. Now, Keon Traina is not the most athletic person on the planet, only 87 speed, but, you know, he does have solid zone coverage abilities. He's someone that is, you know, going to be a solid ball hawk once he does develop. He will have some work to do, but he is going to be the backup safety here in the Big Apple. But then the Las Vegas Raiders also had multiple selections in the 4th round that they can work with. And for their first selection in the 4th round, they go with Dan Thompson, the free safety from Portland State. Also someone that is going to be more of a zone guy. He's going to look to try to take half of the field. But the difference between Dan Thompson and Keon Traina is that he is just a little bit more athletic. But the thing with him is his play recognition is not great. Without the morale boost, it's at 59. Man coverage is at 61. So someone that you will have to keep in zone coverage. Awareness is also at a 60, but he does have decent hands and he's an extremely durable player. But this right here could potentially be a reach depending on how you feel about Justin Jones. He was selected 4 picks later, also by the Raiders. He'll open up as the 3rd string quarterback. Now, Justin Jones, it's clear that he has some talent. He was the best player brought into the FCS Dynasty back in the year number 1 off season. So the kid has what it takes to play, but here's the problem. He's very raw. He's got 50 awareness, and while he is athletic, he's just doesn't have the NFL tools yet. But you know, they're banking on, you know, that ability to really grow and develop this kid, you know, and if it does work out that way, could be the next Lamar Jackson. But there's also some risk of bust potential just because he did throw more interceptions and touchdowns. They're kind of, you know, banking on those physical measurables to be successful in the NFL. But what we do end up seeing is Ikaika Wood's teammate also gets selected in the NFL draft. Blake Williams, the Georgia Southern running back, he is going to be selected by the Detroit Lions as a 21-year-old going off of a pretty good national championship performance. He is someone that did a little bit of everything. You know, he can definitely run through some people. We saw that in the highlights, but he can run away from some folks too, and you know, that's why they see him as a decent scheme fit here in Detroit. Blake Williams seems like somebody that could have potential of having a long NFL career as well. And finally, to round out the 4th round selections, the Dallas Cowboys select Quinn Hardy with the 29th pick in the 4th round. Quinn Hardy was an offensive lineman at Nicholls State, guarding for players like Fred McNair and Speedy Woods, those kinds of players. A guy that, you know, was able to move some bodies and help create a positive run game for Nicholls State. He does come from that option offense, which seems to do a pretty good job of producing NFL talent if you look at, you know, the North Dakota States of the world in real life. So there are no FCS guys selected in the 5th round, so we go directly to the 6th round. And with the 4th pick in the 6th round, the NFL draft, the Miami Dolphins did pick up one of your guys' customs, Doug Rose, representing for Arkansas Pine Bluff, an elusive back, somebody that was a bell cow the minute that he stepped up on campus. He did have some injury issues his freshman year, but his sophomore and junior year, when he was healthy, he could play. He can play some serious football. Somebody that has a spontaneous personality, a flashy player, someone that I really like to watch while he was at Arkansas Pine Bluff. They really made him the vocal point of that offense. Didn't get the opportunity to see FCS playoff action while he was there, but does have the opportunity to craft himself a decent NFL career, even though he was a 6th round selection. Now, a couple picks later, though, Chase Jones would go off the board for the Jacksonville Jaguars as he was selected 2 picks after Doug Rose. The Tennessee Tech quarterback had some decent production, although he never led them to the FCS playoffs during his tenure at Tennessee Tech. someone that the Jacksonville Jaguars look like as someone that could be a potential replacement for the backup quarterback. Their backup quarterback is coming close to being on an expired deal, so a cheaper replacement, as we all know that Trevor Lawrence, he's the franchise guy for the foreseeable future, but Chase Jones could see himself as a long-term backup in the NFL. Speaking of quarterbacks, so Josh Purcell gets drafted. He is selected with the 15th pick in the 6th round. He is going to be rocking with the Carolina Panthers. It's going to be interesting to see how Josh Purcell is used. He's a quarterback, right? We all know this, but at the same time, he's given a running back number. Now, all that being considered, he will go up against another quarterback from the FCS Dynasty. If you guys remember Glenn Williams from Southeast Missouri State, he was the starter before Travis Johnson came on the campus. He is still on the Carolina Panthers roster, but Josh Purcell can come in and take his spot at the third-string quarterback potentially. So, it'd be interesting to see if he can win that out, or will they convert him to a running back because he ran that option offense. And now we finally get ourselves into the 7th round of the NFL draft, the final round. And just going through these final selections real quick, because you guys have seen there are quite a few guys that made it to the NFL this year. Trevor White, he was selected with the 2nd pick in the 7th round. He would be a 23-year-old rookie from Idaho. Then we go later on in the 7th round where we find ourselves with Mike Hill. Mike Hill is a left guard from New Hampshire. He is actually supposed to be listed as a 22-year-old rookie. So we're gonna change that real quick. He's supposed to be listed at 21 years old and has him listed at 22. So we're gonna change that real quick, make sure that looks right. And all right, we're looking good now. You guys can see though that Mike Hill is projected to be the third-string guard here for the LA Chargers here in year number 4 and in his rookie year. 2 picks later though, Joe Rankin will get his name called as well. Also playing for New Hampshire during his college career. He is 6'1", but needs to put on some more weight, only 167 pounds. The Pittsburgh Steelers coaching staff, still led by Mike Tomlin, see a lot of potential in this young man, even though he's a normal depth trait, but don't see him being any more of a special teams guy in his NFL career, seeing how late he was selected. Also being buried on the depth chart to start their NFL career is Benito Zimmerman, the running back from Florida A&M. He was selected with the 25th pick in the 7th round in the NFL draft. Still a decent overall though, 64 overall, but a normal depth trade kind of guy. And while he is elusive, doesn't really bring much more to the table. Also someone that I could foresee getting some special teams run. And finally, the last player from our FCS Dynasty that was selected was John Cooper, the running back from Western Kentucky. He was selected with the 3rd to last pick of the NFL draft, so not quite Mr. Irrelevant, but he was pretty close. Not even the highest rated rookie at the position. It'll be interesting to see if John Cooper can get himself an NFL roster this upcoming season. Can he make the team? But how could I forget the program standards? What's going on with NCAA sanctions around the NCAA? We'll start with a few teams that are now off the hook and are able to compete for an FCS national championship now. Western Carolina, they are now eligible after being on sanctions in years number 3 and 4, so now they will be eligible for the FCS playoffs. Another team that will be eligible for the FCS playoffs as well is Weber State. They are now off the naughty list, and they will be eligible for the FCS playoffs as well here starting in year number 5. And finally, we see Texas Southern get off the hook as they've been a pretty good program in the Big 12, but now they can have a legitimate chance of competing on that national stage. But for this past offseason, there was only one school that was placed on NCAA sanctions, and that is the SMU Mustangs. The SMU Mustangs for this season as well as for next season, they are only going to have 15 scholarships to work with, and for years 5 and 6, the SMU Mustangs will not be allowed to participate in the NCAA FCS playoffs. So guys, that will end up going ahead and wrapping up the entirety of the off-season preview, and I hope you guys did have an opportunity to enjoy it. If you did, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button for me. Hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. And in addition, if you did want to have the opportunity to have a custom player in this series, do me a favor, guys, and go ahead and submit one using the template down in the pinned comment section. You got to drop it off as a comment. Can't wait to see what your guys' submissions are if you are interested. But with that, this is John J Gaming on the mic signing off, hoping you're all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.